Hey guys, it's Akhtar Khan, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the steps that you need to go through so you can profitably start a rent-to-rent business today. So stay tuned. Okay guys, so in this video, what I'm going to do is a walkthrough, and I'm going to talk you through the steps and the stages that you need to go through so that you can start your rent-to-rent business today profitably. So look, the first thing you need to do is location, location, location. You need to be checking and making sure that you are doing the research and your own due diligence on the area that you're choosing to do a rent-to-rent deal in, just to make sure that there's demand for what you want to do. Now, you'd be amazed that I speak to a lot of people all the time. We have people that come into our academy. Obviously, people come onto our masterminds that have been on other trainings, other workshops, and just gone out and seen information out there, and they don't really understand the importance of this, okay? If you choose the wrong location, there may not be the demand out there. There might not be people who want what it is that you're offering. And it might be the reason why the landlord or the owner of the property is quite happy to pass you on this particular property. So recently, in fact, it was this week, we have a bi-weekly coaching call where people can come in and ask me anything inside our academy. And someone presented a deal. And, well, it wasn't really a deal, but again, with her inexperience, she found a deal which looked like it could potentially be a rent-to-rent, but the location that it was in, there was not much in terms of supply. And so what she wanted to do is take this quirky little apartment and turn it into serviced accommodation using a rent-to-rent strategy to do it. But it was in a very remote kind of seaside town in Kent where not many people really go to. So the demand really wasn't there. So it's really, really important. You don't look at a deal and go, oh, hey, guess what? I just want to do this rent-to-rent deal, and here's someone that's willing to give me their property. Well, if you can't rent it out or you can't do what you intend to do with it, it's not going to make you money, and that's going to be the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you will lose money. And I've spoken to so many people who've done this. In fact, there's been people who've come into, again, our academy, and there's been people, just someone in particular that I'm thinking of right now, that went on a course on how to do serviced accommodation, and they went and did some rent-to-rents, and they were just not getting the occupancy they needed for it to be profitable. And they were losing thousands. They were losing thousands of pounds each month from some of the properties that just weren't filling up because they hadn't done enough market research and checked that the area, the location was the right location for them. So the first thing that you must do is make sure that the location is right. It's a good location for what you want to do. So look, remember guys, I'm making a premise here that you understand what a rent-to-rent is. Okay, a rent-to-rent is when you control a property and rent it out. You basically take it from someone and you sublet it. And the purpose of doing that is so you can rent it out for more money and make profit. So if we go into locations and areas where there's no demand, or you can't get it rented out, or it's not going to be fit for purpose, then you're going to lose money. Okay, and the whole purpose of us doing this is to make money, is to make profit. So you can either quit your job, go part-time, or come out of your business, or do whatever it is that you want to do. That means you can live life on your terms. So look, the 4 ways that people do rent-to-rent is sometimes you can just rent it and then rent it straight on as a single let, okay? I've done lots of these. In fact, I prefer doing these because it's simpler. The other thing that you can do is serviced accommodation. So rent it out if you find the right kind of property in the right location and the demand is there, then it's worth doing. Third thing people do is they do rent-to-rents and turn properties into HMOs, or they can rent an existing HMO and then rent it out again. There's some pros and cons with doing this, but you need to be careful. If you're going to go and do a rent-to-rent, you don't want to be spending a ton of money on a property that isn't yours, because you can't get it back, and there's things that can change. I'm going to come into that in a little while when I talk about due diligence. And the final way that you can do rent-to-rents is commercial properties. You can take a commercial property and then you can sublet it out. So the key thing here is really understanding and remembering that you need to make sure it's in the right location and it's fit for your intended use. Otherwise, you will lose out, okay? And there's a lot of people who've had their fingers burned just through not understanding these principles, okay? So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is you need to start looking for deals, okay? So what do I mean by that? Well, there's 2 ways you can go and look for deals. You can start calling up the local agents and saying, look, are there properties available? Do you have landlords that will be interested in doing a corporate let? And start tapping them up and just seeing if there's going to be the supply that's available. If you've gone and done your market research, you've checked out the location, you can see that the demand is there. You now need to be able to go and make sure you can find the right properties to make sure that you can provide the right supply. I'm a big fan of direct-to-vendor marketing. I've done more direct-to-vendor marketing than what I've done deals through agents. The reason for that is because once you're in front of a vendor, it's just way easier to negotiate the deal and do the deal on your terms, and you've got fewer people competing normally. So, you might want to go onto places like Gumtree, places like Open Rent, places like that where you can get direct in front of a landlord and start picking up the phone and proposing if they'd be interested in doing a deal. So you might call up a landlord and say, look, we're looking for a corporate let. We're looking for two properties in that area. This is the criteria that we're looking for. So you'll state what you're looking for, and you'll ask them if they would consider doing a corporate let with you, and you kind of walk them through and talk them through what that looks like. Don't use the word rent to rent because it doesn't sound good. And if they don't, again, anything that you confuse people with, if you confuse them, you lose them. So if they start saying what's rent to rent, you get into territory, you get into language that they're not going to understand. If you say it's a corporate let, you're a company that's going to rent it out from them and give them a guarantee rent for your tenants or for your clients or whatever it may be. Okay. So you need to start looking to see that you can find some potential deals. You've got to start looking, okay? But don't commit and close, because I want to talk you through a few other steps that you need to do. So we're now checking to see that we've got the demand, the area's right. We're now checking to see if we can get the supply, we can get landlords that are potentially interested. The next thing that you need to do is you need to do your due diligence. So what do I mean by due diligence? Well, look, there's a few things that we need to do here, okay? The first thing is you need to do your due diligence on the landlord, okay? Why is the landlord happy to rent you the property out? Okay, a lot of the times these landlords are tired landlords. Okay, you want to find out why they're tired. Is it because of personal reasons? Is it because they're at that phase of their life where they don't want to deal with the headache and hassle? And remember, managing properties takes work. It takes effort. Sometimes it can be a stress. Look, I've owned 2 agencies. And I've got to be honest with you, I hated dealing with the people. This is why I had staff to do stuff, the management, the strategic stuff and everything else, great. But I don't particularly like managing properties. That's why I've got a team of people to do it. But if that's what you're going to need to do, you could quite easily become a tired, stressed out landlord. In the early days of me growing my portfolio, I think I had sub 10 properties and I was managing them myself, and it was a huge stress for me, okay? Because I was trying to do that and run another business and I had a young family and everything else. So it's not easy. So you want to look at why the landlord has become a tired landlord, okay? Is it down to circumstances? Is it down to health? Is it the age that they're at? Or could it be that there is a reason that this property is tiring? Is it an area that is predominantly like a council area or a area where there's like DSS and LHA tenants? You need to look and see what kind of problems these landlords have that have made them tired in the first place. So you need to check them out from that point of view. Otherwise, you could just be inheriting their problem, thinking you're going to make a profit, but you might be inheriting a load of problems that are going to tire you out at the same time. The next thing you need to do is you need to do your due diligence around the landlord's legal situation. So what that means is, where are they financially? Have they got any problems with the mortgage? Is the mortgage going to allow them to sublet to you? You need to make sure that they can do that. Otherwise, they're going to be in breach of their mortgage, their mortgage conditions. If you're going to take a property off of someone who's got a residential mortgage, then they're going to have to get consent to let. You need to make sure that they've got the right insurances in place and that you are able to have some degree of control over that, because the property's still going to be in their name. So if there's a claim or something, you need to make sure that they're going to cooperate and you can have a policy that's in your name that covers you. Okay. The next thing you want to be doing is checking for market demands. Okay, so even though you've done your market research, even though you've found this landlord, even though you've now gone through this process of vetting the landlord and making sure the landlord is the right kind of person that you can do a deal with, you then need to do something where you're going to test actually see what the market demand is. So what I would do at this point here is I would put in a dummy ad. So what is a dummy ad? You put an ad out somewhere for what it is that you want to do. So when I've bought properties that have been outside of my house, out of the areas that I normally operate in, before I do a deal, I want to check to see if there's demand for it. So I put an advert out on Gumtree. Sometimes it's like 20 quid. It's not a great deal of money. Put it out there, create this dummy ad or a ghost ad, whatever you want to call it, and, give a description of the property, take some pictures of the rooms, make it look like how you want it to look, and then just see what sort of responses you get. Now, this way, you've spent 20 quid, you've advertised the property or the room or whatever it is that you're advertising to see if there's any demand before you've committed and signed yourself up to a rent-to-rent contract, the obligation that you've got to pay the landlord and any work you've got to do, you've got an opportunity to just double check to make sure that you've got a demand from people who really want to move into that type of property. Okay, so the next thing you need to be doing is closing the deal and sorting out the contracts. So it's at this point here, you need to make sure you use the right kind of contract. Don't use an AST, because you can't rent from the landlord, then rent again. It's subletting. It's not the right thing. It's illegal. What you need to do is make sure you have either what's called a corporate let contract or a management contract. So there's a lot of people out there that will have contracts and stuff that are bandied around. I wouldn't use that. I'd go to a solicitor, go and get them to give you the right contract that's going to work for you and that particular landlord, because you want to make sure that you're covered. The other thing is this: if you're going to get into a rent-to-rent deal with somebody, depends on how long the term is going to be. You need to make sure you've got the right kind of contract, because if something doesn't work out, if your idea of, perhaps serviced accommodation or HMO, if something happens or something changes, especially given the current climate and everything that's going on right now, if it doesn't work out, you want to make sure that you've got a break clause in there that says after 3 months or after every 3 months, you could come out of the agreement because it hasn't worked for whatever reason. Okay, the last thing that you want to be doing is being heavily strapped up with a rent-to-rent obligation for a property that you can't rent out. I've had this before, and I've had challenges before when I've done rent-to-rents where we've had, not because of the property or the market conditions, but we've had tenants in properties that haven't paid, and we've had to go through the eviction process. We've had no rent for like 9 or 10 months, and we're still obligated to pay the landlord, because that's part of our contract. So you need to make sure that you've got everything like squeaky clean, squeaky tight, and bulletproof, so that if you do have a problem down the line, obviously if you've got tenants in there and they're problematic, that's your job to deal with it. But if there's things that happen that are beyond your control or circumstances, you at least want the option to be able to come out of that agreement. And this is why it's also not a good idea to shove loads of money into doing rent-to-rent deals. I know sometimes people will take a house, they'll convert it into a HMO, they might spend 15 or 20 grand on a property that's not theirs. Well, I don't think that's a wise move. I think if you're going to go to that lengths to do that kind of work into a property, you might as well invest in the skill and knowledge that you need to be able to go and find the ways of financing those types of deals, or funding them, or being creative so you can buy those kind of properties, because you've virtually done it. The problem with rent-to-rent stuff is great for short term, it's great for cash flow, but long term, you're not going to own the asset. So, you want to be doing this as a short-term strategy, but ultimately you want to be moving on to being able to buy more of your own properties and hold them longer term. That's where you're going to build your real wealth from, because then you've got the property, you own it, you control it, and you get the benefits from it. Next thing that you want to be doing is you want to be discussing and negotiating who is responsible for what. So when it comes to landlords, when I've dealt with landlords, when I was doing a lot of rent-to-rent stuff in the past, one of the agreements that I had with landlords was that they would deal with the fabric and the structure of the building. So roof, brickwork and boiler, all that kind of stuff, exterior, the structure of the house, they were responsible for. And anything on the inside, like paint, decorating, carpets, white goods, that kind of stuff, I was responsible for. So it's really important that you get that agreement with the landlord. And again, this is why you need to have this stitched into the contract to say who's going to do what. Because if you get down the road, 6 months down the road, and all of a sudden a boiler goes, and then you're in a dispute with the landlord as to who pays for it, well, you're probably going to end up having to get it done, because your tenants are going to get upset if you haven't got it sorted out. Or if there's a hole in the roof or something happens and the landlord doesn't want to sort it out and you do, you're just going to get into that kind of problematic situation. So you want to make sure you agree who's going to do what, and who's responsible for what going forwards. Now, one thing I think I need to add in here is that you need to be clear that when you're taking on one of these properties, you need to make sure that you've got it to a standard where it's ready to let. If it's not in lettable condition from day one, let's say you got a problem with the condition of the property, let's say there's something that needs doing inside, let's say there's some minor tidying up or refurbishment work that needs to be done, either you're going to need to do that or you're going to need to get the landlord to do that. So that's something that you're going to need to agree upon. And, you might need to say, hey, look, I'll do the works, but I want a 6-week grace-free period. So I will sign the contract today, but, it actually doesn't start until 6 or 8 weeks down the line. This is one of the things I used to do in my agency, because when we had landlords come in, it'd give us 6 weeks grace to kind of tidy the properties up. normally the properties were not in the best shape. They needed a lick of paint. Something was a little bit untidy. We used to send the handyman around there to go and sort it out. But that's what we would do just to give us that bit of grace, and also give us time to get a tenant in there in time. So once the tenant's in situ, then we're paying we're not having a void. It's not like we're saying we're going to sign the contract today and we're going to be responsible today. We just give ourselves a little bit of a lag and lead time, which is something you can negotiate with your landlords. Okay, so it's really important that you go through those points. And then the final point is this: once you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, you're absolutely happy that you've got the right location, you've got the deal closed, you've done your due diligence on the landlord, you've done your due diligence and done a test ad to make sure there's enough demand, you've closed and negotiated with the landlord, you've got the right contract in place, you've made sure you know who's responsible for what, and then the next step for you really is then go out and get the property rented out as quickly as possible so you can start getting the cash flow in. So those are steps and stages that you need to go through. It's important you do this the right way, because I've seen so many people have their fingers burnt. Sometimes it's just from not knowing things, or not knowing what might seem like common sense once you know it. But if you don't know these things, we've all got gaps in our knowledge. You don't know what you don't know, and you can't see what you can't see. So making sure you've got the right area, you've done your due diligence, so you understand the process and the things that you need to go through so that you don't get your fingers burnt is really important. This is important for you to be successful in doing these deals. And look, most of these deals, they will come off. They will come off really well, and they'll be profitable if you've done your research, if you've made sure you're in the right location, if you've made sure there's the right level of demand, if you've made sure that you've done your due diligence on the landlord, and you've tested the market with your dummy ads, and you make sure that you've got everything sewn up properly in terms of your contracts, then this can be something that you can really profit from. It's something that I've done. I've done like over 60 rent-to-rent deals. I don't do them so much now because I like to buy stuff and hold them, but if one came up, I certainly would do it. I hope you found the content in this video useful. Please like, subscribe, and share, and also put your comments down below. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.